Thank you, Tamar. My name's Victoria Barber. I'm a journalist, like Tamar said. I'm here to talk about social networks and Alaska, specifically rural Alaska, and journalism. And I was thinking about this talk, and I decided that I wanted to retitle it. So the new title is Victoria Barber, Confessions, Redemptions, and Observations of a Bandwidth Hog. I started out working in journalism in 2008 at a company called Alaska Newspapers, which owns 6 rural newspapers. It's kind of a little chain. And while the newspapers are all rural, for a long time, all of the editors would report on their stories in Anchorage, including myself. And working remotely, we definitely kept an eye on social media, and a lot of it just sort of happened naturally. We'd go out to these places, we'd fly out to Barrow or Dillingham or Dutch Harbor, and we'd meet people and make friends. They would become Facebook friends, and then we'd keep an eye on their pages, and we'd look at their blogs, and inevitably it would somehow work its way often into our reporting. So that was going on, and it was about 8 months ago that I had probably just like this, just a horrifying experience. And I think that it's kind of a fear that many people who work in offices have, that this will happen to them, but people still convince themselves it will never happen to them. But it happened to me. So I was sitting at my desk in the morning, and my boss came by, my manager, and he said, do you have a second? We need to talk. And of course, my heart just dropped. And he pulls me into the conference room, and he shuts the door, and he says, we had a meeting with all the managers, and our meeting was about our bandwidth consumption as employees, or how employees were consuming their bandwidth. And you were the star. You said you consume over twice the amount of bandwidth of any other employee that works in this office. And it looks like the majority of the bandwidth you consume is done by visiting social network sites, namely Facebook. He pulled out the stack of paper. It was like 2 inches tall, and on it was a log of every single website I'd visited in like 2 months. Like every link I'd clicked, every site I'd gone to, it was all right there, and all of my managers had been analyzing it. It was horrifying. I've never felt like, it was like that moment where you feel completely naked. So I was horrified. I swore off Facebook for good. I was like, never again. And I went back to my desk, newly paranoid about my internet use, and got back to work. 5 o'clock rolled around, and my editor came by my desk again, and he said, do you have another second? Because I need to talk to you again. I was like, I haven't been on Facebook once, I promise. And he said, well, we just got word from management that we've decided that all 6 of our newspapers will each have their own Facebook page. And since you have such a breadth of knowledge about Facebook, we think you should be in charge of setting them up and managing them. So essentially giving me 6 times the reason to dink around on that site as I've ever had before. So in one 8-hour workday, I went from being like my office's internet deviant to being kind of like this Facebook official. And since then, I've been thinking a lot about Facebook and about Alaska, rural Alaska, and about the media. And I have a few observations which are just based on my personal opinion. Observation 1, citizen journalism and Facebook. Sometimes, and this is something I'm stealing from the website Gawker, but sometimes today's gossip is tomorrow's news. I would say that about 75% of the emails I get, I just delete without reading. They're just completely irrelevant. For Facebook, I'd say that number goes up to about 98% of the material that I see is completely, it's just silly stuff, photos, mafia invitations, like, you read it, disregard it, and move on. But every so often, Facebook will break news. When the village of Point Lay landed their first bowhead whale that they had caught in 75 years, or when a teenage boy in Barrow shot his girlfriend and shot himself, or when an artist in Anaktuvik Pass started a tundra-based perfume industry. Like those were all stories that I developed into articles that I heard about first on Facebook. And they're all cases of community members reporting on themselves for each other. Basically, it's just the purest form of citizen journalism. Observation 2, virtual villages. I don't have statistics to back this up, but in my experience, I feel that rural Alaska communities are really cottoning onto social networking media, which might be surprising because internet connections out there are generally pretty poor. But even in places where the internet is painfully slow, you still have like a range of participants in sites like Facebook or MySpace. And you'll have little old ladies who aren't even comfortable with computers or email, updating their Facebook pages and posting photos of village basketball games. And it made me stop to think about why is this platform so comfortable for people to adopt? And when I thought about it, it kind of makes sense. On Facebook, well, I'll just use Facebook, but really social networking media, Facebook being the dominant platform. So on Facebook, connections develop mainly along lines of friendship or shared history or family, extended family. For example, I know a lot about Sarah James, who I went to high school with. I know about her toddler, I know about her divorce, I know that she moved away from Anchorage, I knew that she moved back, I know that she got a new job. I haven't talked to Sarah James directly since high school, since graduation. And when I think about it, I think that's kind of like what it's like to live in a small town. You're immersed in this network of people, and you're immersed in information about their lives, even though you may not be actively seeking it out. And in Facebook, it takes that attribute of geographic proximity and it translates it into kind of a virtual proximity. And even for people who move around a lot or grew up in big cities or move to big cities that are completely unfamiliar, it's like you develop a little small town and you can take it with you everywhere. Observation 3, the shape of things to come. I'm currently living in Bethel, but it almost doesn't matter if you're living in Anchorage or living in the bush. The majority of communities in Alaska are so remote that there's never going to be a time when there's a professional media person, with boots on the ground in every town. But almost every journalist I know, I think there's like one holdout, but almost every journalist I know is on Facebook, either in an official or an unofficial capacity. And the use of social media is growing at the same time that media staffs, newspaper staffs are shrinking. So, journalists are already out there. If you're friends with a journalist on Facebook, I'm sure you've noticed this. They're posting articles, they're vetting ideas, they're getting reader feedback. All of this is influencing their coverage. The things that people mention conversationally on their Facebook pages are sparking news stories and driving media coverage. And I think that as internet access in the villages improves, whether it's a statewide broadband effort or fiber optic cables on the seafloor, it's going to improve, and I see that this whole thing is only going to get bigger. And just think of the implications for things like topics like climate change. You have people in tiny little villages scattered all across the Arctic posting stuff that they notice, just because that's the stuff you talk about. Or the implications for grassroots activism. And I think we got a taste of that when Murkowski did her writing campaign, and people in villages really came out strongly in support of that, and it became a real turning point for her campaign. From a media standpoint, I think that kind of synergy between journalists and audience and sources, I think that's going to become more powerful. And I also think the lines between those different roles is getting more and more blurred. I've read a lot about, or I've read some about, Facebook, social media, Twitter, like how are all these platforms influencing the way that we communicate with each other as individuals? And there's a lot of, I think, trepidation that it's depersonalizing our human interactions because we're not talking face-to-face as much, or we're substituting this electronic platform for face-to-face communication. Maybe it's trivializing our experiences. Instead of revealing to someone you have a divorce, you just change your status update and everybody knows, and including the person you're divorcing. But when I think about how the widespread adoption of social media is going to change things for our state, at least, in Alaska at least, I just feel tremendously optimistic. I think that we're hearing, as the stuff becomes more pervasive, we're hearing bits of information from all over the state that we never would have even imagined existed. And that's essentially what social media is doing. It's bringing the state of Alaska home. Thank you.